Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, me, Mutahar. I told you I was going to make these hacking fucking console videos, and what better system to start off than with my favorite portable system right now as of the second. Of course, I'm going to put a giant asterisk to that, because as further consoles start to get their hacking legs spread out, that might change. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the motherfucking PS Vita up in my shit. I saw a lot of comments from people who wanted to see the PS Vita being hacked, or what the hacked Vita was like, and I figured, fuck, why not? It's a rare beast in of itself, and frankly, it's what I'm interested in anyway, so fuck it, let's do it. Now, for those of you who don't know what the PlayStation Vita is, well, let me tell you what it is. How many of you are familiar with the motherfucking Sony PSP? Sony PSP is a god-tier portable system, and it was a direct competitor to the Nintendo DS. Now, safe story to say over here in the portable console wars, the DS slaughtered the fucking PSP when it came to sales, games, or whatever the fuck. PSP was no slouch though, it had awesome titles. For instance, it had 2 full Grand Theft Auto games, Siphon Filters, amazing franchise that sort of died on that system, a Splinter Cell game, 2 Metal Gear games, one of which being one of the biggest Metal Gear games imaginable, a fuck ton of RPGs, and from a gaming perspective, it had a lot of titles to it. And don't forget Monster Hunter before it ever touched Nintendo systems. This was a system where people put hundreds upon hundreds of hours into to play Monster Hunter. In fact, it was so popular, one of the most popular apps on the PlayStation 3 was an application just to connect people on ad hoc games. It was basically the Monster Hunter connection tool. So the PSP was a great system, but the PSP was also an amazing system because it was so hackable. For those of you who don't recall, when the PSP first launched on firmware 1.5, people were already writing programs for it, emulators, things like that. It was a system that I believe could run unsigned code at launch. I don't know what Sony was smoking at that point, but apparently that was okay. That was just kosher, okay? Everyone considered that to be some halal good or whatever. Now, moving on further, the system got updated, they released revisions, and slowly but surely, it became even more hackable. So, Sony decided, you know what, fuck it, we gotta make a successor to the PSP. What do we make? The PlayStation Vita. Now, the PlayStation Vita was kind of the rage back in the day because it came with some pretty beefy specs, at least at the time, especially for the time. It was touted as the way to bring those PS3 experiences, kind of, to your handheld pocket, and in a way it kind of did deliver. See, what the PS Vita is right now is a pretty experimental type device. If you ask me some of the weirdest questions, I'll give you some of the weirdest answers, and they'll probably be true. If you ask me, Muta, what's the best way to play Metal Gear Solid 3? Oh, well, fuck, I'd say play the Vita. You can carry it anywhere you go. Quarter HD remake or whatever, it works just fine. Muta, what's the best way to play God of War 1 and 2? Fuck it, portably, man, maybe? It's got a portable port for it. Muta, what's the best way to play Final Fantasy X? Portably, man, the Vita's got a portable version right here. But it wasn't just a PS2 port machine, and even if it was, you're talking about some of the best PS2 ports showing up just for the Vita right there. Persona 4 is not a small game. It's an amazing title, and the fact is, the best way to play it with the best visuals, the best widescreen support, the only widescreen support as far as I recall, natively, and the extra content is the Vita. But it came with some of its own interesting games too. You had a fully realized game called Gravity Rush, which is one of my favorite Vita games of all time. A full Uncharted game. A complete first-person shooter, Killzone Mercenary, that was the best in the series probably, and, well, one of the best in the series, and was one of the best-looking console shooter games of all time, and still is. And then you got some of the weirder experimental stuff, like if you ask me what's the worst way to play Borderlands 2, the Vita's right here. It's got a Borderlands 2 for it, and it's absolutely fucking garbage. It runs at 15 frames a second at best, and looks like a bad day after Taco Bell, let's just put it that way. But hey, it's a playable version of Borderlands 2. What else would you want? With all the DLC, mind you. Now, it also had a realized version of Most Wanted. Yeah, the PS3 version of Most Wanted brought down scale to the Vita, which again, ran great. Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, so it got a healthy amount of support, and to this day still does. If you ask me what's the best way to read a visual novel, fucking Vita right here. It's got Danganronpa 1, 2, 3, and fuck every single else, every other thing that's released under the sun. It's got, still to this day, pretty awesome games like God Eater 2 Rage Burst, and Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, one of my, well, I guess favorite PS4 JRPGs right now. It's an interesting game. It's not for everybody, but let it sink in and you'll be hooked into it. Originally released on Vita and one of its native ports. So the Vita is no slouch for actual gaming material. But this isn't about me sucking off the Vita's non-existent cock at this point. Today's video is about hacking the motherfucking Vita. Now you might be wondering, well, how do you hack the Vita? This is an interesting conundrum. The percentile of people that can hack a Vita is growing slimmer by the day. Let me tell you what you need for a PlayStation Vita. I know all the smartasses are going to put in the comment section, number one, you need a PS Vita, so let me cross that off the fucking list for you. You need a PS Vita, but you can't just have any old regular PS Vita. You gotta have a PS Vita with firmware 3.60. Nothing above and nothing less. As far as I know, it has to be exactly on that version. Why? That's literally just what this payload that we're gonna look at is about. Now, in my case, I have two Vitas. I have both of them OLED. One of them is completely updated to the latest firmware, and one of them is hackable. Let me just see if this is the one. Yes, this is the hackable PS Vita. Now, you have to have it at firmware 3.6. And if it is at firmware 3.6, make sure to go into your system settings and disable any way for the Vita to update. Put it into flight mode most of the time if you have to. You don't want this thing updating at all. So what are you going to do to hack it? Well, you're going to connect it to your wireless network, and you're going to go into the internet browser. Now, in your internet browser, you're going to type in henkaku.xyz into your browser tab. And you'll be launched to this site that's pretty fairly easy to read. Henkaku, the revolution is here. Unblock your Vita and run unofficial games and applications. This is what we call a Homebrew Enabler. So if you all don't remember, in the old days of iPhone hacking, we used to hack through like an internet browser. That's because we were running an exploit software through the internet browser itself. And it's sort of what's going to happen with the Vita. You're going to press that orange install button and let it do its work. Your internet browser might crash a couple times on the Vita, and that's totally normal. Eventually, it'll hack your Vita and it'll run a bunch of code and eventually be tossed back to your main screen. Once you get back to the main menu of the Vita, you're going to simply find if you have the molecular shell application. Now, this is an application that will install itself through this payload, and once you have access to this application, you'll know that you've done everything. What molecular shell is a file browser for the Vita. Now, at this point, you have hacked your Vita. Congratulations, you did it. You have completely modified your Vita's firmware. But we're not at the end game yet, because this doesn't matter. While it does, we're gonna go a little step further and cement this as a permanent hack. So, for this, you're gonna go into molecular shell, and while you're connected to your wireless network, you're gonna make sure you're gonna actually need, as far as I know, one of these. You're going to need the firmware, you're going to need the memory card for the PS Vita. And this is unfortunately a downside to the situation as well, but we'll look at that a little bit after. You're going to need these memory cards for the Vita. You won't exactly zoom in, I don't want it to, but it's these tiny SD cards that are just made by Sony for the Vita. Get whichever one you can that's the cheapest. You'll need it to copy the files that you want over to the Vita. Without a memory card, the Vita, even if it's hacked or it isn't hacked, is basically a fucking lemon. So if you don't have that memory card, terrible fucking days. If you have a PS Vita Slim, you don't have to worry about it because it does come with some onboard memory, but if you have the OLED versions, which are the better versions, that's the trade-off. Now here you're going to install a VPK file. And a VPK file, think of it like an application package or a program that you're going to be using on your Vita. This is where the red tape comes in. Some of these VPKs are made by people who want to brick your Vita. So they're going to make malicious files that can in fact brick your Vita and make it totally unusable. And don't expect Sony to be fixing it. It's not going to work that way. So be very careful. There are some Reddit subreddits around that'll actually have a proper community that vets these for you. You can go to wololo.net, who actually is a pretty reputable site for dealing with a lot of these homebrew modified systems. Now, once you have that done, and you have VPK, you have molecular shell, everything ready. Once you open molecular shell, you're going to go and immediately start up you're going to press select on the molecular shell screen, the file browser screen, and at this screen, what's going to happen is it's going to create an FTP server. So because you can't, I guess, natively connect right into the USB port of the Vita and use it as a file browser immediately, you're going to need molecular shell to create an FTP link. So once you press select, it'll tell you that an FTP server is open and it'll give you an address. You can open up the file browser on Windows 10 or any file browser on your OS and just punch in ftp:// whatever your Vita's address is. And at that point, you'll be able to send files to your Vita through FTP. So you're gonna go to enso.henkaku.xyz, who basically have created these same guys who have made the firmware, the custom firmware for the Vita. So once you install this, you're essentially gonna be set in the grand scheme of things. You can install this to your Vita so you never have to worry about running Henkaku and the system is compromised, it's hacked, and it'll always be hacked from day one. So you're gonna get this VPK, copy it over to your Vita, install the VPK file. Again, very simple to do. You copy it over to your, in your device, you copy it to, I believe, the VUR0 directory or something like that. You copy it to your SD card. There's a lot of instructions just on their site alone. And once you do, you're gonna run the Enso app after installing it. And eventually over here, you'll follow all the on-screen directions. And again, here is kind of a risky part. Enso can brick your PS Vita. Again, if you feel comfortable already just running this hack through the web browser all the time, you're safe. But me, I hate doing that all the time. I want to make it a permanent jailbreak. So do this if you want at your own risk. I've done it 6 times on 6 different devices. I've never had a brick device. So if you get a brick device, I don't know what to tell you. Satan really fucking hates you. So sorry, but take my word for it, I've done it on 6 different devices, not had an issue. So install Enso, and once that's done, you restart your device, and sooner or later you'll realize that, yeah, I have a completely hacked Vita. So what can you do on a hacked Vita? Well, with a hacked Vita, you can run emulators. You can copy all your physical cartridges over to the Vita itself and just play them directly off of that. You can run homebrew applications. You can install RetroArch. You can do whatever you want in the grand scheme of things. You have a hacked Vita, congratulations. Now, of course, over time, the viability of this has sort of dwindled down. You know, you can basically do the exact same stuff, if you will, on a modern day smartphone, but I mean, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, okay, you might wonder what's the point of it. I'll tell you, why do you modify cars, okay? Why do you cook? Why do you have a hobby, okay? Who the f***? Getting a moddable PS Vita is not a simple thing to do. For one, they don't sell these anymore in North America. I don't know about Europe, but they don't sell this shit anymore in North America. And unless you get really lucky and walk into some backwoods Walmart or backwoods like electronics store or a mom and pop shop that still have a bundled Vita, like in a box, you might be lucky and get that. You have to get one brand new that is in a bundle. If you find like an Uncharted bundle, a Gravity Rush bundle, a game bundle that is from a relatively old Vita game, you're lucky. You could easily get a moddable system then. The other option is importing from Japan, which as the days go by is getting more and more difficult because obviously in Japan the Vita is far more relevant, and because of the relevancy, Sony tends to release these packages with more updated firmwares. And hell, if you don't get 3.6, you get something below, you might be lucky. You could spoof your way up through a fake update server and get yourself to 3.6. But if you're over 3.6, there just simply isn't a way to do it, and not for a long time. The team, I believe, is not putting any effort into creating any further hacks for the PS Vita past 3.6. And if they are, it's kept on the hush and hush. Sony has a tendency to find these issues and patch them out really quickly. Back in the old days of PS Vita hacking, we used to buy games from the PlayStation Store to run like PSP emulators on. You can do that on a hacked Vita, but again, that's putting into perspective how difficult this kind of shit was. So again, I know that I went off on a bunch of tangents, and I sort of have a pretty guerrilla style of telling you how to hack a system, and I may have sort of an abrasive way of telling you this, but this is one of my favorite systems right now. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I use it a lot when I travel. You got a solid battery life with these Vitas, even the OLED versions, that you can get a lot of good gaming done. The best way to play SNES games, hands down, is on this beautiful OLED screen. Game Boy games, SNES games, fucking anything you want on the market. The Genesis titles play perfectly on this. And add the fact that you got a whole bunch of Vita titles to play around with anyways, you've got a whole value on the system. Even if you don't hack it, even if you don't hack a Vita, you can remote play your PS4 games anywhere in the world and play them in the palm of your hand. Truly, it's a great system to have, but it does come with its caveats, and at the end you might be wondering, why the fuck I didn't just do this on my cell phone to begin with, or fuck, get a GPD win. The day when the Vita the Switch becomes more hackable and it gets its first custom firmware is a day that I might have to retire the good old Vita. And when that day comes, you'll see me make a video about modifying this bad boy. And hopefully by then, we will be past the days of the Vita. That being said, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like we dislike it. Let me know what console you want to see next modded. I got a whole treasure trove of them. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.